I don't know how often you think about the pandemic now, and when you think back to it, do you think that maybe your experience of the pandemic changed the way you view the world? We all had our very personal experiences through it, good and bad, but somehow we all felt as if we were in it together in some way or another. Well, there was that analogy, same storm, but we were all in a different boat. Well, a Swindon woman has been looking at this in some detail. She's created a rather lovely book detailing the stories of more than 30 local people, so that she's looking at the pandemic through their eyes. Millie Stone is the author's name, and she joins us now on BBC Radio Wiltshire. Afternoon to you, Millie. So tell us a little bit about the book and all these fabulous stories that you've collected. How different are the stories?
Oh, they're very diverse. So what I did was during lockdown and after lockdown as well, I conducted interviews with 33 different people who all live in Swindon, and I looked at their day-to-day experiences of the pandemic, and it takes quite a long-term view as well because it's after the lockdown as well, so it looks at the cumulative impact on people's lives.
And from many different walks of life?
Many different walks of life. So you've got people who've never been busier, the ICU nurse, the funeral director. You've got people who were furloughed at home who, have never had a sort of quieter time, or a lady in a residential home, very much isolated on her own in her retirement flat, with her family just dropping the shopping at the doorstep. So a huge mix of people.
And how did they feel about sharing their stories with you? Was it something that most wanted to do?
I think because I began the interviews during lockdown, there was a sense of people wanting to share. I think it's also really interesting. It's the first time I've ever done interviews over Zoom or on the phone. And I think Zoom's quite interesting for a project like this, because I think when we try to socialise over Zoom, we feel a certain distance from the person. But I think when it comes to interviewing, I really felt like I could disappear a little bit more into the background. And I felt one woman said to me that basically she told me her life story because she felt like she was talking to herself. Wow. So that was a very, interesting experience as well of what...
A bit of the confessional, almost.
Yes.
And why did you want to do this? What was it that made you think, this is something that I need to do?
I think I was, I think from that moment, I think most of us can remember where we were when we first heard that announcement back in March 2020 from Boris Johnson of stay at home. And I think we all knew that we were entering some unknown territory, that something pretty extraordinary was unfolding. And I wanted to capture that experience as we all lived through it. I was very curious as to how it was affecting different people very differently.
And have you shared your experience of the pandemic in the book?
The hardest part for me to write in the whole book was the introduction. So I wrote a first draft, I showed it to the editor, and they came back with the question, where are you in this introduction? And it was a very good question because the people who I've interviewed, they were so honest in sharing the details of their lives that I came to realise that I needed to share what had been going on for me as well.
And?
So a large part of my lockdown was to do with, I've got two children. My daughter at the time, she was 14. Before lockdown, she'd actually already been signed off school due to ill health, due to anorexia. And so lockdown, obviously I wouldn't wish lockdown on anyone, least of all young people, but with lockdown, she was no longer the only one on her own at home missing out. And I was also around and at home, and I could be there with her for every meal, every snack. We were together.
And was that a good thing for her? Did that help?
I think it helped that she wasn't missing out on what was going on everyone was in the same sort of situation. And I think having me around, an anorexic's only medicine is food, but food is also their greatest fear. And by that stage, I'd become very familiar with her habits of, in a blink of an eye, she could slip food into a pocket, up her sleeve, onto somebody else's plate. And I'd become pretty aware of those habits by then. And I think just having that time at home together was an opportunity, actually, for her to face up to this voice that raged in her head against every mouthful. It obviously wasn't an easy time, but,
No.
Slowly through that turmoil and the quiet of lockdown, she really did face a lot of her fears, and mouthful by mouthful began to regain weight and with it her life.
That's wonderful. And she's doing well now?
She's great. She's at sixth form college now, a few years on. Yeah.
That is good to hear. And you look and sound as if you're delighted to have come through this whole journey yourself and to have written this book.
It's been an absolute pleasure to, an honour to be able to have listened to all these stories, and I'm so excited now bringing them all together in this book, which is going to be published tomorrow. And
brilliant. So it will be available in all good bookshops?
All good bookshops, and Bert's Books if you're in Swindon. Is
the best bookshop.
Yeah, and there's going to be a launch event on Wednesday evening at the Tuppenny. Well, everybody's welcome.
Fantastic. Millie Stone, you write under the name A.J. Stone, and just remind us of the title of the book.
Unlocked, Portraits of a Pandemic.
Unlocked, Portraits of a Pandemic. Available in all good bookshops from tomorrow. Millie, thank you so much for coming to see us this morning on BBC Radio Wiltshire, and good luck with those book sales and any future writing projects that you've got. And we will, on BBC Radio Wiltshire, be hearing from one of the people featured in Millie Stone's book tomorrow morning here at 11:30. It's a belter as well. You don't want to miss it.